Hi, this lesson under Module 7, Correcting and Identifying Run-ons, is focused on conjunctive adverbs and also transitional phrases being punctuated correctly in sentences. If these two types of parts of speech aren't corrected properly or unpunctuated properly in sentences, you may have some run-ons on your hands. The first two parts of Module 7 focused on identifying the two different types of run-ons as well as correcting those types of run-ons. So again, I want to focus in this part of Module 7 on identifying correcting run-ons with a focus on conjunctive adverbs and transitional phrases being punctuated correctly so we don't have those run-on issues like we might have. So let's take a look at this next slide. Conjunctive adverbs and transitional phrases may cause run-ons in formal academic writing if punctuated correctly or not at all. And remember, I stated in part number 1 of this particular module that run-ons can be the most costly and the most common grammatical mistakes that students make in their college academic writing and composition courses. So we want to try to eliminate those particular problems. And using conjunctive adverbs and transitional phrases in academic writing gives students more sentence variety, and also it establishes more complex and compound sentences, which was something that we learned in the previous module. And we also want to have our writing seem more sophisticated. So using transitional phrases and conjunctive adverbs will allow smooth transitions from sentences to sentences or point to point or idea to idea, as well as give us a little bit more sophistication in our writing, and that's always a good thing. So to make it easier for you, I have given you a list of most common conjunctive adverbs and transitional phrases. And this list of adverbs and transitional phrases, words or phrases, please use them in your writing, because again, these words will give you a better flow for your sentences. They make one idea flow easily to the next idea. So it's good to have good transition words throughout your writing. So you might want to use some of these words throughout your writing from this point on. Now, there are ways to use conjunctive adverbs and transitional phrases correctly, and again, punctuating them correctly eliminates those run-on errors that we might have otherwise. Now, when a conjunctive adverb or a transitional phrase joins two independent clauses, and remember we stated in a previous slide as well as a previous module that an independent clause is a fancy way of saying we have a sentence, and a sentence must have a subject, a verb, and express a complete thought. So you use a transitional phrase or conjunctive adverb between two independent clauses. A semicolon precedes it, or the transitional phrase or conjunctive adverb, which means a semicolon comes before it and a comma goes right after that word or phrase. So let's take a look at an example that I have here. I have several for you to practice with. Example number 1. Bob and Ellen decided to go. That's our first independent clause. Decided is our verb. Bob, Ellen is our subject. Then we have a transitional phrase, likewise. I also changed my mind. And I also changed my mind is another independent clause or sentence. Changed is my verb. I is my subject. So I have two independent clauses that are joined with one of our transitional phrases. In this case, it's likewise. And that was on your list in the previous slide. Now, because I have two independent clauses, I have to have a semicolon before the word likewise and a comma after it. Okay. Let's look at our second example. Lucille really wants a new car. That's our first independent clause. Wants is our verb. Lucille is our subject. We have the conjunctive adverb or transitional phrase, however. Then we have a whole nother independent clause. She cannot afford one. Can afford is our verb, helping verb can. Afford is the main verb. And remember, the word not, N-O-T, or N''T is not a part of our verb. So we have to not even look at that word not. So we have can't afford as our verb, she is our subject. Now we have our transitional phrase, however, that's combining our two independent clauses. So I must have a semicolon before the word however and a comma after it to combine these two and have it complete and also correct. And let's look at our third example. The dance finished early. That's our first independent clause. Finished is our verb, dance is our subject. We have another sentence. Finally, we could get something to eat. Could get is our verb, our complete verb of the sentence. We is our subject. Finally is one of our transition words between two independent clauses. Semicolon goes before it and comma goes after it. So it's a little bit tricky. So let's recap what we just learned. Now when you have a conjunctive adverb or transitional phrase combining two complete sentences, also known as two independent clauses, a semicolon goes before that conjunctive adverb and a comma goes right after that conjunctive adverb or transitional phrase. Okay, there will be certain times where you have a comma before it and a comma after it, and we'll actually talk about that in just a little bit. But two independent clauses, semicolon before the transition word or conjunctive adverb, comma right after it. Now, conjunctive adverb, this is our trouble spot number 2, our transitional phrase can also begin an independent clause. If this happens, a comma is needed immediately after it. So our example we have here, Bernadette said Mary stole the bike. That's one complete sentence. We have a period after it. Said is our verb, Bernadette is our subject. Now we have a whole nother independent clause that begins with one of our transitional phrases. Therefore, Mary was arrested. Was arrested is our verb, Mary is our subject. Therefore is our transition word that introduces our independent clause, Mary was arrested. So I need a comma right after that transition word. Okay. Now our next example, the teacher gives a quiz every morning. That's one complete sentence. Gives is our verb, Teacher is our subject. Our next sentence begins with another one of our conjunctive adverbs, otherwise. She would not be a good teacher. So otherwise begins this independent clause. I need a comma right after it. Now our third error, or our third problem that can occur when a conjunctive adverb is with a sentence, or as part of a sentence, or one of our transitional phrases as a part of a sentence, when a conjunctive adverb or transitional phrase joins a dependent clause and an independent clause, a comma goes before the conjunctive adverb and another comma goes right after it. Okay, that's what I was telling you before. So when you have an independent clause being combined to a dependent clause with a conjunctive adverb or transitional phrase, we have a comma before the conjunctive adverb or transition and a comma right after. So it's not a semicolon and comma, it's a comma, comma. Have my example here. The owners close the store every Wednesday. That's my independent clause, my complete sentence. Close is my verb, owners is my subject. Now I want to add a little bit of extra to this sentence to make it complete. So I'm using my conjunctive adverb or transitional phrase, however, that I'm continuing with the sentence, not on Tuesdays. If you notice, not on Tuesdays is not a complete sentence, can't stand alone and make sense. Not on Tuesdays. What's not on Tuesdays? So it's a sentence fragment by itself. But I want to add not on Tuesdays, which by itself it would be a fragment or a dependent clause, to my independent clause, the owners close the store every Wednesday. So I have an independent clause and a dependent clause being combined by one of my transitional words, however. So I need a comma before however, and I need a comma right after however to make this sentence complete. Then I have my next example, rare books are extremely valuable. That's really my independent clause, one complete sentence there. I have a verb, I have a subject. Then I have my transitional phrase, for example, and then I have a dependent clause, Audubon's Birds of America. Now, by itself, Audubon's Birds of America is not a complete sentence. It has no subject of the sentence. It has no verb of the sentence. Doesn't make sense by itself, okay? So I'm adding that dependent clause to my independent clause with the transitional phrase, for example. I need a comma before, for example, and I need a comma right after, for example. So now you know how to correct sentences when there are conjunctive adverbs or transitional phrases that are combining independent clauses together, or they're combining dependent clauses with independent clauses. So again, this is to help you eliminate those run-ons in your sentences in your academic writing, because run-ons is one of the most costly and one of the most common grammatical mistakes that students make. And again, hopefully with practice, you can actually improve upon your writing and eliminate those run-ons.